Hello and welcome to Faith and Honest Conversation. I'm Thomas Rowland and this is James Fount. Hi, James.
Hello there. Hi.
And we're here to talk as honestly as we can about our own experiences of faith, whatever they may be. So hopefully you can have your own experience of faith and know that that's okay, or maybe others have shared experiences, or really make it okay in our experiences as well. So James, we as we always do, we started off with a bit of silence. We kind of floated or mused about the idea of acceptance. I wonder if anything else came up, or if you want to start us off there.
Well, it was good that I kind of mentioned it, because then when we were sat in silence, I was sort of like, I suppose, musing on it and dwelling on that, and just like the acceptance of being, and the acceptance of being still and being quiet and being in solitude, and the peace that all of that brings. And there were lots of other thoughts that were kind of floating around and not intruding, but I was aware of, other things that like I've done today or over the week, and like still got to do other thoughts of like more mundane activities. And but the fact that I'd sat with the intention of just accepting, there was like a mindfulness to it. There was just a sort of an acknowledgement, and I suppose that my thoughts turned to what's the difference between that, what I've kind of termed radical acceptance and mindfulness, and I guess they're adjacent in what they are in some respects. So there isn't a big difference between mindfulness and accepting where you are and where you're, what's going on. It's just like another way of framing it, maybe, and another sense of, oh, this is what I feel when I'm in that state. So mindful, you're aware of your thoughts, and you're aware of what's coming and going, but you're not necessarily chasing them. You're allowing them to flow. With acceptance, you're accepting that those thoughts are there, that you don't have to pursue them. You can pursue them if you want to, but there's no need to no need to be anywhere else, no need to be doing more than you're doing. And it's something that I think I've talked about before, but I rarely practice. And I think just over the last couple of days, trying to bring it into my day-to-day as part of my, I suppose, spiritual and daily practice and secular practice, whatever. I mean, I used to have a teacher who'd say either everything's spiritual or nothing's spiritual, which feels very like absolutist, but I got the essence of what they meant, is that, like, there's spiritual elements to everything that we do. And I think that the being in that place of acceptance allows me to either detect it or acknowledge it in some respects.
Yeah, I think that's important for me, that this idea of acceptance and awareness kind of really going hand in hand. When you were talking about mindfulness, I was thinking about how I define that, and I'm no expert in its underlying philosophies or anything like that, but I think a sort of awareness is of how things are, is kind of a real part of that, an awareness of maybe the present moment, of what the flow of experience and sensing and everything is in that present moment. And I was thinking how, and I think this is part of mindfulness practice, but just how important being able to accept it is like, if we can't, or if we struggle to accept what we could be aware of, or what's going on, then we're going to distort it a lot of the time in some way. So either we deny that it's there at all, or we kind of transform it into something else that we can tolerate a bit more, or something else. So I remember I always used to say I'm tired, but I think that's because I couldn't accept that maybe I was a bit frustrated or annoyed or something. So tired was a much more acceptable thing to be aware of inside of me. So that kind of meeting place of awareness and acceptance feels a really potent thing, I think, because then it releases a lot of the energy in our experiences, or the wisdom in our experiences.
Yeah, I really like that. It's like an active awareness as opposed to passively allowing it. That I guess is the difference between like acceptance and mindfulness and being just living your life, is that there's an awareness element. You're actively becoming aware of the present moment rather than just allowing it to happen, and living in it. But you're living in it, and you're noticing it. You're taking an not so much an active role, but an active observance of the moment. It's sort of hard to explain, but I can see how that would impact have an impact on your emotions and on what you're feeling and sensing and experiencing, and how that would give like I liked what you said about releasing its power, releasing its energy. So I was walking with a friend of mine the other day, and he's not in a great place, and we meet up and we have a chat, and we talk about what's going on for us and difficulties we're experiencing and whatnot. And there's an urgency or an urge inside me to want to repair that or fix that for him, or wanting to make that okay, or somehow leave him in a place where he's better than he was before. And so, and that's not possible, that's not necessarily, it's to start with, not, it's not like necessarily helpful or healthy. But by becoming aware of it, I can acknowledge that it's there and allow it to pass without acting on it, without feeling driven by it or pulled by it so much, because I'm watching it, because I'm seeing and observing it and going, oh, that's interesting that I'm feeling that. So it's you're right, it's the awareness itself that allows you to accept, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think they go hand in hand. If part of me is unable to accept something, I'm not going to become truly aware of it.
Totally. So if we find ourselves in a place where we're so uncomfortable that like parts of ourselves start to shut things down or protect ourselves or defend ourselves, then we might not then be able to accept it, or we won't allow ourselves to become aware of it in some respects.
Like, I guess with your friend, maybe that, but this is just my imagination when I've been in similar things. So it's more my experiences now with similar situations, perhaps. But like, if I can become aware that maybe I'm starting probably to get a bit frustrated with somebody, if if I'm able to accept that part of me, then I can start becoming curious about, okay, why am I getting frustrated? What's going on?
Yeah.
And then I can start to think, oh, I want to fix him or her.
Yeah.
And then I can be curious about, oh, okay, what's like, if I'm okay with this drive to fix people, which I've kind of gotten used to, I can then be curious about, okay, what's happening there? And it might be to do with them, that they're really crying out for somebody to help them, and there's a certain desperation in them, or they've lost contact with their own agency and power. And it can be something in me, I guess, of like, there's actually something in my life that I want to fix, but I can't fix, so I'm projecting it, or like there's some sort of, so I can. And as I think, as each layer of that exploration releases something that is kind of quite rigid or pent up in this constrained action, or which is usually me just going silent or something, like it releases possibilities, I guess.
Yeah. And it makes it takes away some of the judgment of that as well, doesn't it, when you acknowledge that, and to that, as you say, that there's the layers element to it. So you start to acknowledge, okay, I'm feeling frustrated, oh, that's because I'm wanting to help or change, or because there's something in me. And so then you can keep uncovering and unpeeling more and more aspects of what's going on interpersonally. And I think, my brain's just all firing off now, because I'm thinking, okay, so that's really important from a spiritual point of view and a relational point of view, and from as a counsellor, from that perspective, wanting to make sure that you're helping someone in the right way, and it's not because, as you say, there might be something in you that you're still working on, and so that there's like a whole host of things that it really can help just measure and be constructive with what you bring, instead of just going, oh, this person needs help, so I'm going to help them, and going in 2 feet, and it not necessarily being what they want. They might just need to be listened to. They might just need to have company. They might just need all sorts of different things, or they might genuinely want some advice, or want some guidance, or what you think, or this and that and the other, and that's not just in the counselling room, of course, but in every interaction. And it made me think, when you were saying that, about, there's this thing I read recently. Well, so recently, I read it a while ago, about a dad who would, when his kids would come to him and they were upset or whatever, he'd ask them sort of fairly early on in that conversation, do you want me to fix this with you, or do you want help fixing this, or do you just need me to listen? And it was like very clear, and the way they worded it, I was like, oh wow, yeah, that's really important. And then realized that's kind of like what we do as counsellors anyway, is that, we're not there necessarily to fix people's problems, but we are there to listen and to offer sort of like a reflection, or a paraphrase back, or some sort of alternative perspective, and that can be so powerful. But we can't do that if we jump straight into, oh, I need to help this person out, because actually that might be the most helpful thing to do that.
And there's something about being able to accept what's going on in us that allows us to accept the other person in whatever's going on for them, and what they feel they need.
Yes.
And if if we're hell-bent on helping somebody, then we're not going to be able to accept that they don't want our help.
Yeah. Yes.
They're
Yeah.
actually quite competent, and don't need us. Like they're gonna then start bruising our own egos or something. And I think there's something there. I don't know if this is mindfulness tradition or a different sort of Eastern tradition, but something about detachment. That you know, if I'm very attached to this idea of myself as a helpful person who helps people in need, then I'm going to need to do that at most opportunities
For validation, to
yeah,
validate that side of it.
yeah. And I'm not going to be able to accept that either that I'm not actually that helpful, being that helpful, or maybe that others don't need me. Similarly, if I'm very attached to this image of myself as being calm and nice, laid back, then I'm going to find it very hard to accept that I get frustrated and irritated and really want to punch somebody sometime or something. So I think this idea of detachment is quite a useful one as well. It's like why can't I accept something? Is it because I'm rather attached to something?
Yeah.
In maybe what we could call our ego or our image of ourselves. And again, that image of who we think we are can be quite restraining.
Yeah.
And it actually ends up squashing a lot of the possibilities or energies that are going on inside us. Yeah. And I think that goes, but it also circles back into acceptance that, you know, maybe we're acceptable or we can be accepted. And I mean that in terms of like valued and valuable and belong and lovable and think all this, that I can be acceptable even if I'm not this image of myself.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to meet those expectations or those ideas of what I think I should be in order to be acceptable. Then I'm not going to be as attached to those images, and then I can accept more of what's going on inside me.
It makes space, doesn't it? If you've got less of a solid concept of who you are or who you're supposed to be or who you think you're supposed to be, it allows for growth into other areas and expansion and change and I guess dilation of the self that you can see. Like, so for me, one of the things that I really struggle with is confrontation and being angry with somebody or for whatever reason. And so I've got various strategies and various sort of like systems in place that kind of hold me back from getting to that stage or hold me back from feeling or experiencing anger. And so and I see myself, as you say, as a calm person, as like non-threatening, non-confrontational. So then if I'm presented with a situation where I do come across that way, and that's happened at work and that sort of thing before, where someone's intimidated, not because of anything that I've done, but because of who I am and how I present. So then, and that sort of like conflicting feedback that you get, if there isn't any space for that, then that can create quite, I suppose, like a I was going to say disjointed, like a rupture internally, like where you just you just don't, you can't cope with that, and then we'll have to try and do something to fix it, which will inevitably make it worse because it's layering more stuff on. But if you're accepting of that and you can acknowledge it and see that and you have the awareness of it, then that's where you can allow that fixed image of you to sort of like stretch and change and become malleable and Yeah.
Mhm. And I think this is. Oh wait, I'm really tempted to go to a real philosophical place.
Go for it. It's
but
all
also
right.
I want to hold back. I want to come back to a spiritual like experience as well. But I think this for me kind of goes back to like the idea of who am I, identity, and actually maybe I'm. I think one helpful way that I'm kind of musing about, or something I'm finding helpful, is kind of like maybe I'm not anything in particular. Like I can have the whole host of human experience that's possible for me, and I don't have to be a certain identity.
Yeah.
And then I think it becomes okay that, like, oh, I was really vicious just then, and I don't like it, but that doesn't stop me being me. It's just I have the capacity for viciousness as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or coolness, or insensitivity, or but also in that, like, oh, I can be quite powerful, or quite able to influence things sometimes for the better. And so I think the ideas of ourself and what our identity is can kind of really restrict us, and just restrict the reality. Like I am a human being that has the whole capacities and of other human beings, presumably.
Yeah.
And it just restricts that. But I think that goes for me quite hand in hand with like I'm just reflecting on my own experience of Christianity, and my like my faith in that. And I think I grew up in a place that was very hot on, that really valued confession.
Right.
Kind of like, you're sinful and confessing sins is good. And so I really went into that. And I think that was, but it did have also a but that, but you're forgiven. Like if you confess your sins, you're forgiven. Like that's the love of God, unconditional
sort of the transaction, of it.
Yeah. And kind of this confessing it then restores the relationship and with God. I think there was something good in that. I'll get on to the next bit, but like I think what it made me is quite introspective, and I think it meant that I was more aware maybe of the kind of darker, if you want to call it, elements of my experiencing, because I could kind of meet it with this idea that I'd be accepted in the end. If I could just get in touch with it and confess it and accurately, then it'll be fine. Then I'll be forgiven. So I think that side of things I'm quite used to because of that, or I became quite okay with. Apart from some things were also not allowed in my Christianity as well, even in that sort of confession thing. Like I wasn't aware of cruelty or or particular maliciousness, maybe, or some things, but I'm not sure I would term that radical acceptance, because I had this idea of, if I dig and dig, what's going to be there is sinful. And so I had this idea of myself as ultimately not acceptable.
Right. Okay.
Because we were all sinners, we were all sinful, kind of original sin sort of ideas there. I think where I would more place myself now is this, like, actually my experience of myself when I dig and dig is actually I get to something that's actually really understandable.
Mm.
and and usually trying to get somewhere, or go somewhere in life, or live more
Yeah.
meaningfully or lovingly or something. And so I mean, at the conceptual level, I've redefined sin as this sort of non-acceptance of ourselves, or divorce from ourselves,
Mm.
rather than something bad inside of us, if that is making sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. So as opposed to like, there's like, I hold sin inside me, and I have to dig down to get it out and release that through confession.
Like purge it in some way.
Purge it,
Yeah.
yeah. It's more of a, like a, by not exploring and digging down into yourself, you're not learning about you, not accepting who you are, and so, and that barrier, or prevention of you knowing yourself more, having awareness of yourself, having acceptance of yourself, that's the issue, and that's the thing that needs to be broken down.
Yeah.
So the blocker to it.
Yeah. And I think I'd kind of term that as shame.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm more inclined to call sin. This kind of self-shame, than that, like there's something deep, in me that's malevolent or something.
Yeah.
Because what I've found when I can approach myself with some level of acceptance is actually is that these layers of experience get down to something that's really meaningful and feels full of life. And I guess it's like trust. There's a trust or a faith element in that I'll get to something understandable, at least, which you could put in a concept of made in the image of God, like there's something divine or something good,
Yeah.
there. But yeah, and I do think that's how my experience in terms of my faith with acceptance has shifted. Like this, a more radical acceptance. I'm just borrowing your term, but I'm sure we might mean different things. But a more radical acceptance being, oh, I'm okay, rather than I'm not okay, but I'm accepted anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Like yeah, I'm with you. So it's like the okayness is already in you. It's already part of who you are. That who you are is okay, and that what you're coming to is a place of accepting that you are okay.
Yeah.
It's very complex, isn't it?
I mean, I say that. Yeah, it is. It's a nuance, but I think that's been a important nuance for me.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And you know, I'm by no means completely accepting myself all the time. Most of the time I don't still. But yeah, there's something about, I think there's something so energizing. And so I guess where I come to now is that the deeper I go, the more in touch I am with the spirit.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
my spirit that maybe meets God's spirit, or the fusion of the two in some way. That there's an energy there that is trying to do something, or is aimed at something,
Right.
that is ultimately good, or can be trusted. Although the way it percolates out, can you percolate out? I don't know.
Sure.
Or the way it kind of bursts out through the layers, gets disjointed because of this sort of lack of awareness or lack of acceptance. But I think that's important for me, important in another way, that like the mindfulness has this kind of feel that it's taken us away from life. But I think for me, this sort of acceptance and awareness is in order to really engage in life.
Yeah. It's not you're detaching, but only as it's not even fully detaching. You're sinking into yourself to see more of yourself, almost.
Yeah. And then engage with the world in new ways or new possibilities.
That's it. Giving yourself more scope.
Yeah. Because then, with our friends that I'm annoyed with, I've got a whole host of options or things to explore that could be helpful or could not be, and and then and it's also okay to explore and it not be helpful. Like I don't have to, if I can accept myself, accept whatever, then I can accept that some things I do may not be helpful, even if they're well intentioned. Or I feel like I've spoken a lot. I don't know where you're
That's
at.
quite all right,
James.
No, it's really it struck me a lot when you were saying that about the about sin and about the confession side of stuff, and I just noticed in me like I struggle with that language now. Like I used not to. That used to be something that I could cope with quite easily, but now, like where I'm at with things, the word sin, I haven't got really a place for it anymore. I haven't got like, oh, it means this and this and this. I'm like, oh, what does that mean? And so I'm like in I don't struggle with it as in like I disagree with it. I just struggle with it. I don't have as clear a concept of it. It's a lot more nebulous. Maybe it was always nebulous, and now I'm allowing it to be more nebulous. Have the space for it to be more nebulous. And I think that maybe there is like a detachment to mindfulness. I don't know enough about mindfulness it's just showing what I need to read up about, really. But there may be like a sense of dissociating, or not dissociating, detaching with mindfulness, whereas with what we're talking about here, it's much more engaging internally and sitting in your deeper self, just to get to see what insights that brings, to see what things that you can see and experience and accept and become aware of in yourself, and in yourself, about others and about yourself. And there's like it just feels very good. It feels like a very good place to be. I'd love to do it more than I do, and I'm glad I've started to engage with it a little bit more. And maybe it is just a bit of a lifelong journey doing that, becoming more aware, and I guess that there's an element of it. People might say, oh, it's just self-awareness, but it is more than that, because it takes self-awareness initially, and then to acknowledge that maybe you're not accepting your position or where you are or who you are, and then to accept where you are and who you are, is the like kind of another step along that path, at bringing that self-awareness with you, and then employing that self-awareness to see things from that perspective, I suppose, from that more accepting place. I think I'm just describing it more with more words and maybe
Yeah,
not
no,
clearer.
I mean, I have to be honest. I lost you halfway through the last sentence, but I think where I went to was we can get to a kind of form of acceptance what we have to do, and we then can't accept our own non-acceptance. That was a lot of, but
words, isn't it? Lots of A words. Why do we do this?
Awareness, like it feels like, oh, I really should be accepting, or I really want to be accepting, and when we really become, I think, aware, we realize how unaccepting we are, and how it's really difficult to move past that. And maybe what could be radical about acceptance is accepting, or being aware and accepting ourselves, even our incapacity to be that accepting. Which I think is important, that we don't just become another sort of morality, or this is what you should be doing. And I think for me relates, like, is the concept of the gospel of, like, even though we can't do it, like, we're still completely wrapped and infused and everything by God's love and acceptance. Yeah, but that's, I mean, that's another concept on top of
it's another layer. So you're saying if we reach that, or we become aware that we're wanting to become accepting, and we're unable to get there yet, that we're still acceptable like that, and we're still held in that place by a much grander acceptance, the acceptance of God, and how that just allows space for us to be in that place of, turmoil, I suppose, or however we're feeling with that, or struggle.
It's like if I can become aware that in a sort of prayerful moment, it's like, God, I just can't being, I can't accept this or something, and God's like, I know, I've always known, and it's all okay still. And I think that's I mean, that's how I imagine it, and that's what's meaningful for me in this. But like that, like, can we get to a level of acceptance of that is just okay with everything? And what's coming to mind is all is well, all will be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things. And maybe all is well, and all manner of things are well too. Like that sort of real, for me, a real sense of, whatever, you can throw anything at me, but it's still okay. We've got about 5 minutes left. I don't think I have anything more.
No, I think you said it perfectly with that last bit, and it's where I landed when I was thinking about radical acceptance, and I was like, oh, somebody else has come up with this concept already. A few years ago, it's called Julian of Norwich, and a really pithy saying for it. And it's great, because it's certainly, like, thinking of that. And when I was writing about it this morning, I was like, I really should have that written down somewhere where I can see it every single day, just to remind myself. But it's quite nice allowing myself to fluctuate and go, oh yeah, I remember acceptance. That was such a good thing. Let's practice it for a bit, and gradually I'll build it more and more into my life until it becomes a thing. But we'll see. I'll let you know how it goes by next week.
And it's really hard to like, I really react to what you're saying, is like, a practice sort of thing to build acceptance, and I guess how much acceptance can we have of our the what I think is a fact that we will be unaccepting a lot of the time. However, I completely recognize that practices help us to
build it in,
and to reconnect with that sort of awareness. Yeah. And it's odd. It's not like what's going to help me be more accepting, but it's kind of just like a shift of positioning or a shift of
perspective, almost. Of just sort of like, oh, hang on, I can see things from over here, and it's comfortable for me to sit in this place and look at life in that direction, and actually sitting here does help. And I can stay here and this is all right, and then go to sleep and forget about it. Which is invariably what happens
until the next evening, maybe,
until the next time.
A few days later or whatever. It's life though, isn't it? It's just like how and I think how unaware I am most of my living, just how helpful, or the fullness that I think it brings when I can sink into myself a bit more. Great. Well, let's leave it there.
Definitely.
Thank you if you've listened. I hope you found it helpful. And join us again next time.